Alright, this is going to be a quick one, but an interesting one. Yeah, I want to go over how I might lay out something. If you're learning UMG, it could be a good idea to try to mimic a screen. I was playing some Persona 3 lately, and I looked at this layout and thought this might be a good use case to just kind of give a demonstration of how I might begin to lay this out in Unreal. So this is where I've ended up. I also have this strange material in the background that's doing mouse coordinates, but ignore that for now. That was a test for something else. And we can take a look at just our root widget we've got here, our overlay. Holds the whole thing. Got that background image, just making it dark. We don't really need that. So I'll keep it off. Horizontal box, that's gonna position. We've got a spacer, kind of pushing the contents over that way. A vertical box, that's gonna hold the rest of my content all in here. In that vertical box, I have a spacer pushing the content from the top. You can see here I'm using a fill and a ratio. So I want it to be like, 30% the size of the screen. Same with this spacer over here. I want it to be 5% the size of the screen. So it's kind of how I'm doing proportional stuff and not fixed pixels per se. Vertical. Got our header. Has the lists. We've got our widgets. These are our tarot list items, and they're all, I believe, manually translated. Are they? I thought they were. To be in the right position. Let's see how I did that. How did I do that? Yeah, padding wise. Not translated padding wise so that you could have the contents inside. I kind of did the calculation here. 2244, so it always moves up by 22. In an ideal world, this is a dynamic entry box, and you just know to include padding based on some sort of variable that you put in, but we're just listing out some wireframes, so you don't need to go that hard into this. Then I've got a common visual attachment here, a fantastic little widget that'll remove it, take up layout space. We've got our image for the progress bar, and we are that little image is set up here, doing a little fun in there, and I've got my spacer proportional at 80 pixels at the bottom. I just want a fixed spacer there. We got just on the right side of this horizontal box, so the content's always being pushed by 0.5% on the left and 0.5% on the right. And the last little bit's got a vertical box that has our text in here. A little bit of horizontal vertical stack combinations. You could actually do this with a stack box or a wrap box, which might be a better use case, but I made this before. I was heavily using wrap boxes, so maybe that's a different video if you want to get into a wrap box that kind of removes the need of the horizontal box and the vertical box combined together. If you're interested, let me know and I'll make a video about that. A little demo on wrap boxes if folks are so inclined. Trying to keep this short and keep my engagement short so I don't have to plan crazy videos. We're going to go in here and take a look at what this widget is. How did I make it? What sort of rules do I follow? Most things in my layouts is I like to set my screen to desired, not fill screen if I'm working on a widget that's inside a widget. You can see what we've got going on here. Got a list view. We've got a overall grid panel. I believe the reason I have an overlay and the grid panel wrapped together, yes, is to include a little bit of padding on the top and the bottom so that our overlay, it sits there. You can kind of see how much space our overlay is taking. So it looks like that is why I have done that. The style should be a new comment button style, so it doesn't have a background in there. So this is a comment button base, so this could turn into a button that you click, etc. as the base. Now let's get into it. We've got our grid panel. We've got our that is having apply padding for our overlay. Let's go into the first image, which is our lovely little background image. Just making it a nice little gray, setting the image size over here, and I should be, yeah, shearing it over here in the transforms. So it won't actually take up layout space. If we go to this grid panel, you can see it's not going to include this little corner triangle here when we actually put it inside of its layout. No, I like the bug where it stopped updating the items in here. But all of these shouldn't have the, oh, there it is. There we go. That's more like it. Removing that common button base there. And now, oh yeah, that's why I put the 22% or the 22 padding, is that so that this would make a perfect line across here. If you want to see it at its glory, that's what that's doing. So it almost looks like the line is perfect across that area. That is why I did that. I love it when I look at something I haven't seen in months and do it. But I just started playing Persona 3 recently, so I made this before I started playing Persona 3, and now I've started playing it. Anyway, this is my lovely background image. This is just the background says the card. If we go back to the Figma and see, it's got that, the select state. You can kind of change some of the key things, but pretty easy to go off of. I have a vertical box, and inside of my vertical box kind of contains a lot of our other contents here. So we've got a horizontal box that's going to contain, it looks like, all of the top row content. And this overlay that contained the bottom row content, so that's why it's stacked vertically. These two things are on top of each other. And our last little overlay here is containing the card, the tarot card. So, and it's all in the grid panel with not any columns and rows and fills. I'm using the grid panel as essentially a smart overlay where I can control the Z order. And I believe I'm doing that so I can always have this render on top. If I don't see the layer set to 1 on the child widgets, and I'm using it for nudge for kind of pushing it, moving it aside, but if I set that back to 0, you can see it gets rendered underneath everything. But I want this to always render on top, so I'm going to have a layer 1 there to always force the Z orders. So that's why I'm using the grid panel. And it looks like I'm using for some nudge properties over here. Great. Let's go into the very first part, our horizontal box. I've got a spacer here that's pushing this content out, so it's going to be not underneath this tarot card. So the spacer is literally taking up space in our horizontal box. Great. We've got text. It's set to fill the entire rest of this container. You can see here in our horizontal box properties, it's going to fill the rest of the container. Then I've got my rank. And we've got this kind of complicated setup to get this number going. I have again another common visual attachment. This basically, anything inside of it's going to not take up layout space, which is great because if this massive text were to take up layout space, it would actually push the content up to get the size of the text really large. So if I drag it out of here, you can see it's going to push the contents up and down based on the ascender and the descender of the text, but I don't want that. So that's why I have it inside of the common visual attachment. This is going to take up no layout space, and the common visual attachment, I have a content anchor a little clicked and dragged over here, but that's going to set where I want it to be, and therefore it's all placed up and looks great. And let's like change it to be, I don't know. I think Roboto is monospace, so this shouldn't have any issue like switching to a 9 or anything, rank 5. 95, no, 5. So all that is looking great. Then we've got our, so that's our horizontal box in there. And I believe that this entire overlay is just holding the contents inside. A little spacer to force this to take up at least width space, because if I don't do that, right, the common visual attachment is going to say, hey, I take up no space at all. And I'm like, no, you need to take up some amount of horizontal space here, but I just don't want you to render the vertical space of the characters. So I have a little spacer in there that's just forcing a 56-ish pixel size to enforce that. Next up, in our little stacking of our vertical box, right, our vertical box has the horizontal and overlay. The bottom part's pretty simple background. Rounded box with, so we can get little edges, and then we have the persona, or the person's noun, name, something down there. And then the last little bit here is this card. It's got an overlay container again, and I would do this in the material, in the final form of it. If we take a look here, I'd probably do this in the material, and you can actually see here the X actually extends out of the card base, but I was trying to make sure that the text fit in the card base no matter what. But you know, it can get kind of dicey. In this overlay, this would all, I kind of flatten probably all this overlay in the material and then have this text be separate. But anyway, in here I am just angle rotating this. And then I have one exactly the same rotation, but the sizes are different. So the size of one is 65 by 95, and the size of the other one is 70 by 100. And that kind of gets me this double stacked border layer. And then we've got our Roman numeral text in here. And I believe I smidgen, yeah, translated it over just to kind of get it centered in the card space here. Yeah, and that is the card layout as it stands, so pretty simple. And we go back to that list, that's kind of makes this nice card layout here, and voila, we've got that. So keeping this video pretty short, but wanted to showcase like how do I with Graybox make something that isn't maybe a traditional thing. You could actually wrap again all of this, or this could be a dynamic entry box, have your own scroll bar here with that common visual attachment for the progress, and have each new entry pad offset itself by 22 pixels so that you can kind of keep this lovely angle that they have going on there. But that is that is me attempting to do just a quick little layout. I think they did the rest of the background here probably in the actual 3D rendering game scene, and this was probably UMG on top. So that's my thought, and yeah, let me know what you think, what other widget layouts questions you might have, and trying to make some quick videos getting some good layouts, tips and tricks that I use. And common visual attachment, a big one. And I should have done this in a wrap box, because you could see how I use them to avoid stacking and combining a lot of vertical boxes and horizontal boxes together. And you got to see how I like to use spacers as kind of like percentage proportions to keep stuff from a certain percentage from the screen. I like using spacers in horizontal vertical boxes for that particular reason. So let me know what you think, and hopefully you'll get some better widgets and layouts in your UMG.